Hi, I want to talk about revising your personal essay. Yes, this essay is harder than it looks when you first start. You think that it's just going to be straightforward, you get to tell a story, but to do all the things that these authors are doing takes a lot of strategy. It also takes attention to the genre, the style of writing, because every style of writing has its own specific patterns, and you have to follow those. And at first, it doesn't seem like this essay, the personal essay, has those things, but it definitely does. So let me talk about a few things, especially things that are related to the rubric that I provided for you. There is a clever title that pulls readers in, it grabs them, but it doesn't tell them everything they need to know. So you have titles like Traveling While Latino or What I Found in Standing Rock or one of my favorites, Joyous Survival, the Literacy of the Hillside Strangler, and anything else extra we know, which is so bizarre. You just, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Crying in H Mart, a few words about breasts. And I know some of you read that just because of the provocative title. That's what titles do. You also have to choose a publishing magazine, a magazine that would actually publish personal essays. Not all magazines do. And it needs to be one that would publish your essay. For example, probably you could never get published in the Players Tribune because it only publishes athletes who are kind of famous. And so if that's you, then yes, you could publish in the Players Tribune. But if not, they probably wouldn't publish your paper. So what does an online copy of the article look like in that magazine? You've got to pay attention to that too. You should have a magazine logo at the top of the page, title, font. Does your magazine have a subtitle, an epigraph from the text? Does it have an image? New Yorker publishes lots of personal essays. Here's Crying in H Mart. And you can see what this looks like. This is pretty standard. Some of the older ones, like D'Ambrosio's Documents, they don't have that, but that's because they are old and they're sort of like reprints. So here is Crying in H Mart. New Yorker does really cool artwork. You'll notice the style of font. My computer's being really funky right now, and it's stuck right here. So you'll notice the very typical style of font. You see the image. You see there's an epigraph from the text that kind of lures readers in, and very specific style of font. Traveling While Latino is published in Atlantic, which also publishes a fair number of personal essays. And again, you see the Atlantic at the top, the title, and then not, and then a quote from the text and an image. This is published in the Washington Post, Cannon Fodder. And again, logo at the top, font, and then a claim from the text. An image, it's an original image. You notice they don't put memes there. They're putting other types of things. Also notice, and something I didn't mention, is these texts will have the author's name and the date of publication. I think that's all of them that I pulled. Yes, it is. Look closely at your online magazine and see what the texts do. looks like, because you want to make it look like it belongs in that magazine. Also, all of these essays have a strong emotional hook. This one is really riveting. These are the first two paragraphs from Unspeakable Conversations. He insists, he does not want to kill me. He simply thinks it would have been better, all things considered, to have given my parents the option of killing the baby I once was, and to let other parents kill similar babies as they come along, and thereby avoid the suffering that comes with lives like mine, and satisfy the reasonable preference of his parents for a different kind of child. It has nothing to do with me. I should not feel threatened. I mean, it's like, why does he want to kill me? Why does he want to kill her? What does that mean? And so it's like so circular, it kind of grabs readers in. Michelle Zauner is a less zingy, and yet it's compelling, because it pushes us into her head, with the sadness. This short sentence: ever since my mom died, I cry in H Mart. For those of you who don't know, H Mart is a supermarket chain that specializes in Asian food. The H stands for Han Arum, a Korean phrase that roughly translates to one armful of groceries. And she expands on what H Mart is in a way that makes it interesting to me, even though I've never even heard of H Mart. I want to know more. And I want to know more about why she cries in H Mart. And um, and then she talks about where she cries. You'll find me crying by the Bonchon refrigerators, remembering the taste of my mom's soy sauce eggs and cold radish soup, or in the freezer section, holding a stack of dumpling skins, thinking of all the hours that mom and I spent at the kitchen table, sobbing near the dry goods store, asking myself, am I even Korean anymore if there's no one left in my life to call and ask which brand of seafood we used to buy? And it's so different from who I am, but she's pulling me in through her descriptions, through her emotional distress. Or this is Amanda Machado. Whenever I travel abroad, the conversation with locals almost always starts with the same question. So this general question, where are you from? I never have a definitive answer. And so instead, each time I stumble through many. My mother's from Mexico. My father's from Ecuador. I was born in California. I grew up in Florida. As a daughter of immigrants, I find that no answer seems entirely right. And all of a sudden, we are plunged into her story. We know she's a traveler, we know a lot about her, and we know her confusion. So every one of these hooks is emotional, it pulls us in, it makes us ask questions, it leads us in the direction of the rest of the essay. It's not random. We want to know more because it's not, these are questions the authors make us care about the questions. In saying this, I'm going to say, pay attention to your mentor text. You're going to need to chart your mentor text, how the author starts, how the author builds the argument. This is due at the end of the project. Here is my chart of Callie Linfor. I put on the left, I put the parts of the essaying, like the title, and then you will see your title goes in the right-hand column. There is no epigraph here. And then I put paragraphs 1 through 5. What is Callie doing? And this is what you would do. What is your author doing? And I note that the author is establishing setting and background. And then I put what she's doing, describes a news event happening at a set point in time and how she learned about it as a young child. The effect of this is she's building her own identity. I list rhetorical strategies she's using. And in the right-hand column, I would put what I do in paragraphs 1 through 5. And it continues all the way down. Make note of my chart because you're going to build your own chart for your mentor text. In addition, at the end of the project, I'm going to ask you to examine your mentor text more holistically. Look at that second paragraph on the slide. General observations. Create a list at least 5 key features of your mentor text. And for each one, answer the following questions. How do you incorporate this feature into your paper? Were there any features that you chose not to include? Why? Were there any other things you noticed after your first draft? So this is, like the mentor text is there as your guide. And because that's part of the learning process, I'm going to ask you about that. Not only that, but the rubric includes how did you use your mentor text? So you're going to want to develop that chart really completely and these observations, because if I don't see how you've used your mentor text and you don't show me how you've used your mentor text through these other things, then chances are you will get a lower mark on the rubric. I'm also going to ask what evidence you used. You don't have to create an MLA or APA citation. You can give me a hyperlink. I'm good with that, but I want to know how you used it and what it added to your discussion. Some other things that I'm going to ask you about at the end of the project. I'm going to ask you what your inquiry question was, what you're most proud of in the essay, what your greatest challenges were, what rhetorical strategies you used, and what appeals did you hope that would evoke. Remember, rhetorical strategies and rhetorical appeals are not the same thing. We discussed this earlier in the semester. I'm also going to ask you about your use of read strategies. I'm also going to ask you about your magazine that you published in, who the target audience for that magazine was, and how you know and how did you consider this audience in your essay. All of these things matter. And I'm grading this reflection. It isn't just you answer all the questions and you get all the points. I'm grading you on your completeness and your analysis. Some other things to remember. Your personal essay is not all about you. Your stories illustrate this larger point that you're making, which you're going to need to tell me what it was. My Father's Body at Rest and in Motion, Siddhartha Mukherjee tells the story of his father's death and how it prompted him to think about life. And so, yes, it's a story of loss, but it's also a story of his thought processes. And in reading his story of loss, we begin to think about our own lives. Make sure you have lots of showing and not just telling. Your mentor text can guide you in that. So if you're using Kelly Linfor as a mentor text, she's super descriptive. Megan Daum in My Misspent Youth, also tons and tons of description. I can see the streets of New York City, even though I've only been there once. Paul Graham in How to Do What You Love is less sensory description, but he's got other types of descriptions. Again, think of your mentor text. And if you decide to veer away from something your mentor text does, talk about it in the reflection. One thing every single one of these authors do is they show us who they are. Paul Graham doesn't really show us like visibly who he is, but his sarcasm, his commentary, his irony, his attitude shows us exactly the type of person he is. David Sedaris, that's him on the right. There, we get a really good idea of who he is and what matters to him. Again, we don't see him physically, but we know who he is. He's like this random, non-linear person who grabs us, makes us think. He's got a sense of humor and bizarre details. Amanda Machado, again, we don't see her physically, but we know who she is. We know where she comes from. We know a lot about her. Same thing with Viet Thanh Nguyen. We know him. We know his background. We know what he cares about. Those physical details about who we are may be less important than the word choices, the voices, the attitudes, the things the authors care about, where they come from, the kind of conversations they have with people or with their sisters, as in Laugh Kookaburra, their dads. I mean, like, these are the things that matter. If you're wondering about what that is, take a look at Philip Lopate's article on turning yourself into a character, because I think that that says a lot about that. Also, the article about exigence talks a lot about that. I want to talk about remembering. This is a phrase that Callie Linfor used when she talked to my class about writing her essay. And the thing is none of us remember word for word those conversations that happened to us 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 30 years ago. If, for those of you who are over the age of 30, we don't remember them exactly. We don't remember the details, like what's on the mantle or what kind of lamp there is or what color the dishes were. But sometimes those details matter to allow our readers into the situation. So we have Philip D'Ambrosio, Charles D'Ambrosio, sorry, on the left. We don't know. Chances are he didn't exactly remember his dad sharing the poem with him, but he has a copy of the poem, and that brings back some memories, and the rest he remembers to create a picture for us. Does Harriet McBride Johnson remember every conversation she had? In the essay, I sincerely doubt it, but she remembers it to recreate it for us. So we are invited into precise moments of her story. It is as if we are there in the moment. Same thing with Callie Linfor. Does she remember her mom's attitude and the way she smoked? Chances are not exactly, but we know enough. And Callie Linfor remembers enough that she can recreate it in a way that puts us in the moment. As I've had my students write, there is a phrase that they use a lot, and it is fast forward. Fast forward 5 years, or fast forward and I'm here. Stay away from that phrase. It just doesn't work. Instead, show us, set the scene. But that was when I was 6. Now I'm 10. You're like, set the scene, to give us ages, show us the place. Don't just like zoom. Even like we see in movies and television where an author will have a flashback or a flash forward, but they are showing us. We see the author being different. We see the place, because that's how movies and television are. When you're writing, you have to recreate it. Don't tell general type stories that cover large swaths of time, and instead tell in the moment stories like our writers do. second person. That's using you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And you're going to have to decide what's the best. Is it reaching out and talking directly to your audience or not? So I suggest you look at what your mentor text does. And in general, don't say to your audience, imagine this. Like imagine you are a fish swimming in a fishbowl. I have had that in an essay. Generally speaking, that doesn't work. I have seen it work, but most of the time it doesn't. It's something that you might ask of a younger audience, but you're writing to adults. So read my comments. None of you have comments at the time I'm filming this because I have just finished grading my RWS 200 class. I'm going to comment briefly on all the essays once. You're turning in 2 drafts. And by the end of March 13, I will have some brief comments for all of you. If you want more extensive comments, make an appointment to meet with me. And that's all I've got. Have fun revising. Remember, revision isn't just fixing sentence level errors. Revision is really re-seeing your essay, organizing ideas, taking ideas out, adding, subtracting, expanding, more details, fewer details, different details. That's what revision is. Gosh, I wish I'd said that at the beginning. No worries, I'm done.